So it looks like we are live. What's up, Action Tribe? AJ here, host and founder of My Seven Chakras, my7chakras.com, the show where we help you calm your mind, relax your nervous system, and experience deep states of bliss. In today's episode, I chat with Sujith Ravindran about powerful topics such as abundance, giving and receiving, trusting the universe, and living your dharma, your purpose, while allowing the universe to fully support you on your sacred divine mission here on planet Earth. So, if you like this topic and if you'd like to support us, then make sure that you hit the subscribe button, especially if you're on YouTube or maybe if you're on iTunes or Spotify. Hit the subscribe or hit the follow button because that does something to the algorithm, allows more people to get to know about our podcast in this episode. And that's one small way in which you can help us and stay tuned. And before we actually start today's amazing episode, which I'm really looking forward to, let's listen to our latest lovely iTunes review written by a user named Masala Girl on iTunes. And she says, inspirational podcast. I love listening to the My Seven Chakras podcast. Informative and inspirational. AJ has fantastic guests and a great interviewing style. A must for anyone looking for tools and techniques for living their best life. So, if you'd like for me to read out your review as well, then make sure you go to my7chakras.com / review. My7chakras.com / review. Write out your thoughts and I'll read it out. All right. So, with that being said, let's bring on our special guest for today, Sujith Ravindran. Sujith Ravindran is a contemporary mystic and a serial author. He helps leaders, institutions, and movements in the social, political, and business domains access unforeseen realms of awareness and fulfill their true reason for existence. He is the author of The Seven Mystical Laws of Abundance and the founder of the Being Abundance movement. For work around spiritual upliftment, he was also awarded the honor of the Ambassador of Peace in 2012 by the Council of Assissi in Italy. So, Sujit, how are you doing? Welcome.
Good morning, or should I say good evening, Aditya. Thank you for having me here. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's such an honor to connect with you. And thanks to technology, we both are able to actually enjoy the benefit of the sun, except that I'm enjoying the dawning of the sun, so to speak. And I guess in
Yeah,
your place, the sun is sort of setting down, but it's still the sun.
Italia, it's a few minutes past 6 p.m. in Italy. Yeah, so evening time.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
And Sujit, with all my guests, I usually start with the very beginning, or at least beginning in this human form. Where were you born and brought up, and what was your, childhood like?
Me, um, I was born in India, in Kerala. I don't know where in India are your roots from.
Mumbai.
Mumbai. All right. Okay. Kerala. So, really growing up as a country boy, you know, with the little delights of making those paper boats and floating them in the rainwater and, running after the ducks and the frogs. Um, I perhaps the matter of most distinction in my life was um, finding my first teacher at a
Mm,
very young age. And while I went to the regular schools, Aditya, in parallel, the thing that enamored me even more was the the subjective education of life with these masters, with these teachers. You go to school
mm,
and you learn about geography and history and chemistry.
mm,
Whereas with these masters, you learn about life,
mm,
love, joy, fear, health, the purpose of existence. And that subjective side of my education is something that I've loved so much. And I've grown up with
mm.
that. And until 22. I was in India. I went to university, my first university there. But always in parallel, there was this other education that was continuing, that was about the spiritual sciences, about consciousness, about the subjective self. That's pretty much how it's been. And since then, from 22, been traveling, living abroad, many different continents, many different roles, activities. There's a beautiful saying, you travel to find yourself.
Mm.
Very true, very true. And the older and older I get now, I see, Aditya, that, a deeper connection, returning to India, wanting to discover more of myself, reconnect with the immense spiritual ocean that India is, deepening that connection in spite of the lockdown, the COVID, and all of that. And
Mm.
Italia is such a beautiful place to be. You know, uh, Middle of the world in a certain
Mhm.
way, yet close to India. And it gives me space to just be with myself very often.
Very, very true. I mean, I love what you shared there. And you said Italy is very close to India. It is, I think, very close to India physically as well as culturally, because if you think about it, back in the times of the Roman Empire, there was a lot of trade that happened between Italy, the Roman Empire, as well as South India in particular, Kerala, because of the spice trade. And
Hmm.
at one point, I think there was a Roman senator, Pliny, the elder, who complained at the senator and saying that, this must stop. We're sending all our gold to India. What's happening? You know?
I'm not sure a lot of that is happening these days.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
but indeed, you look at it, Italians, my wife is Italian, by the way.
Right.
And, you look at their culture, customs, their excitement about their festivals and holidays, very
Hmm.
similar to India.
Right.
Same thing, the breadth and tastes of their food in Italia, very much like India. The family values, the relevance and importance they give to family. Um, Again, very, very similar to how it's in India. And thinking of family, I also know you told me that your mother is recovering these days from COVID.
Hmm.
And I want to send my thoughts, my prayers, my energy to her
Hmm.
for a rapid healing. And of course, Aditya, strength to you
Hmm.
in these moments.
Yeah, I mean, if we think about the spiritual journey, this is the ultimate test that I've gone through, me and my family, in just being in a position where I am so helpless across the seven seas, across the world, when they're not allowing you to travel that much. And even in Mumbai, my mom is in the hospital, still on ICU behind the doors, where you don't get to see her, touch her, connect with her. So it's been definitely such a journey, but I know that especially in these times, although there are doctors who are looking after her, giving her the medicines, I feel that the healing energy that we're able to send, or maybe the prayers, sometimes could be equally or even more powerful in being able to, allow her for her lungs to strengthen, heart to strengthen, and then come out of this stronger than before. So thanks a lot for the prayers.
Beautiful.
So, Sujit, you've shared so much so far. You said that you met your guru, your teacher, at a very young age that really allowed you to have that subjective experience of what this world is like and what the spiritual experience is like. And then at the age of 22, you decided to travel. And when you said that, what came to my mind was the story of Bilbo Baggins from Lord of the Rings. I'm not sure if you know of him, but he
Hmm.
always used to talk about the importance of travel, and when he was home for too much time, he would feel that sense of nervousness that I want to go back again, because in traveling he gets to know who he truly is and gets to
Hmm.
find home.
Yeah.
And so my question to you is, what was your first job like that sort of gave you an opportunity to travel to all these different countries and meet people? How did it begin for
Ah,
you?
I was a management consultant in the maritime industry.
Okay.
So that is, completely different from my spiritual world.
Mm.
And it's for most of that life, of course, maritime industry means you get to travel.
Hmm.
And loved it because I was a thirsty, young, curious about the world. And that's how I got involved also with leadership, with
Mm.
getting into the corporate world and multinationals, being taking me to many different parts of the world. So it was a blessing. It was a blessing. As much the lockdown has been a blessing for me this
Hmm.
last 1 year. Yeah, I should say 1 year. Slightly over 1 year. It's been a completely different lifestyle. I don't know how it's been for you, and I'm curious to hear, how the
Mm.
lockdown has been for you. And
Hmm.
at the expense of sounding narcissistic, you know, the last 12 to 15 months have been some of the most profound,
Mm.
rich, uh, fulfilling months
Yeah.
of my life.
Yeah.
And that, in spite of this 180 degrees pivot
Hmm.
from my previous life of, nearly 9 months every year on the road, there
Mm.
is a beauty in this too, an
Yeah.
amazing beauty.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, apart from the last, I'd say 20 days when my mom actually got admitted into the hospital, I'd say for the most part, the lockdown has really taught me a lot about life. It has allowed me to serve and support people, especially on Zoom, that I would not have had the opportunity before.
Hmm.
Through breath work, through meditation, it has allowed me to go within, experience my blocks, experience my darkness, experience my challenges, and also find a way to actually use what I learned in order to go beyond, and knowing that this is not the end. This We're going to come out of this. This is a temporary phase, and also being kind to others. Also, I think that's
Yeah.
important. This phase is creating a lot of divisiveness, and knowing that everyone is doing their best with the information that they have and with the
Yeah.
opportunities they have.
Yeah.
So
That's a great way of putting it. Everyone is trying their best.
yeah, yeah. So, Sujit, what is your definition of abundance?
Hmm. Well, what is irrelevant here, Aditya, is what I feel abundance is.
Mm.
Because, I look at my two little kids,
Mm.
for them, abundance is what? Play, love,
Yeah.
togetherness, seizing every moment. I look at some of my neighbors, old couple, I live in the woods. So the nearest neighbor is like quite a few meters away.
Yeah.
Um, for them, abundance is quiet moment together, sharing moments with their near and dear ones, being
Mm.
healthy. And here is where the most important invitation, Aditya, for us is to just take a step back and ask what abundance is for me, for each one of us.
Mm.
And just to give that space to the audience, to the listeners too, abundance can mean um, one of five things, five
Okay.
areas in life, depending on the priorities in our life at this given moment. For some people, money, materials, and health is abundance. For some other people, love, companionship, and community is abundance. For some other people, success, self worth, and identity is abundance.
Hmm.
And for yet other people, meaning, purpose, and wisdom is abundance. And lastly, for some other people, self realization, transcendence, and bliss is abundance. So, somebody who is yearning for deeper meaning and higher purpose, extending
Hmm.
that person success and identity is not going to be abundance. So
Right.
abundance is a very personal thing, depending on which stage of life we are in. So, I wish I could give you like a very straightforward one line answer, but the fact is, abundance is very subjective.
Yeah, that's so very true. And I love that you gave our audience a moment to really ponder what abundance means to you because it's so subjective. For some people, abundance could be having wealth to support themselves. For some people, abundance means they're stuck in a job that's paying a lot, but they just want a break, a vacation. For me, abundance right now is just meeting my mom. That is the abundance that I would have to see her and knowing that she's recovering. So it's such a subjective experience. And Sujit, one of the things you talk about is the law of exchange. And you write
Mhm.
that the universe operates in giving and receiving. So could you tell us more about this?
Yeah, yeah. Aditya, the seven mystical laws of abundance, or the seven spiritual laws of abundance. You see, these are I myself I inherited this wisdom when I was very, very young. Did not make any sense to me then. Perhaps at an unconscious level, I knew that these laws were relevant, were true. But perhaps at an intellectual level, I wasn't ready to embrace them. And it's only been in the last 15 years that I have truly embraced those laws and made those laws the modus operandi of my life. Of these seven laws, the first law, perhaps the foundational law, is the law of exchange, the recognition that the universe operates in giving and receiving. This is It can be interpreted in a very, very holistic way if you want, or it can also be interpreted in a very mundane way in our daily lives. In the holistic sense, the sages recognize that what we call the universe constantly operates in the force field of the masculine and the feminine, the two energy forces, you know the force field in which all of manifestation, all of birthing, all of creation and destruction happens. And if you don't keep that giving receiving the energy flowing, then there's not going to be a universe. Which, if we translate, Aditya, into our regular life, just look at a relationship that you have, with a partner or a friend or a neighbor or a business partner. If you stop practicing giving, after a while you will notice that that universe, that microcosm of a universe called your relationship, will slowly disappear if you stop giving. Common sense.
Mhm.
Now, perhaps a bit counterintuitive for most of us is the receiving part, the capacity to unconditionally receive. Kids are fantastic at that. Kids don't have any thoughts about receiving. You give them something, they'll take it, grab it, and run. They don't stand there wondering, wait a minute, now what do I give back in return? Now, should I be giving her a glass one day in the future? Or maybe I should find myself some flowers to give to her. No, kids have no such filters to receive. They are the best examples of unconditional receiving. So, back to the first law, the law of exchange, the universe operates in giving and receiving. It comes down to our capacity to unconditionally give and unconditionally receive. You know, giving means giving for the pure joy of giving, not absorbed like many capitalists that I know around me. They are absorbed with one question, what's in it for me? Nothing like that. Come at it from innocence, discover the pure joy in the act of giving, and give for the sake of that joy. Same thing, unconditional receiving. Receive like a kid. That is practicing the law of exchange.
Right. That is so wonderful. And meanwhile, I noticed there's a crow that is wanting to get in on our conversation. So I'm just going to close the window a little bit.
Not at all. I'm actually enjoying that crow.
Yeah. I mean, I love that we have all these different planetary forces that want to get in on this wonderful conversation. But for the years of our listeners, I just want to be a bit mindful. But what you're saying is so true, because when we think about either giving or receiving, there's so much of emotion involved, right? Especially when we are receiving, we're always thinking about what is that better gift that I can give to that person, because I want to tap into reciprocity. I want to make myself look good in terms of them, because also on the other side, when someone gives, there's an expectation of return either today or tomorrow, or maybe you need to do a favor for me. So there's always this weird emotions that are there in receiving but also giving, because so that's really interesting, and hopefully it brings into awareness the status quo and the importance of unconditionally giving. That's so important.
And receiving. And
And
receiving.
receiving.
Indeed, you touched upon, two impediments to the practice of the law of exchange.
Yep.
This idea of a reciprocity,
Mm.
that somehow because of our inner lack,
Yeah.
there is a conditioning, and many of us, we've even made it our narrative in our life. Reciprocity, reciprocity, reciprocity.
Mm.
That for me to feel my self-worth, I expect reciprocity in this relationship. That is lack. That is lack. Why am I obsessed with reciprocity? That means I'm attached to the outcome, the rewards,
Mm.
which is counter to the third law of abundance, the law of detachment.
Mm.
So what we receive is proportional to the level of my detachment from the rewards. But if, as you put it, you use two words, you use the word reciprocity and you use the word expectation of returns.
Mhm.
That is counter to the third law of abundance, the law of detachment.
Mm.
A detachment from the rewards. And knowing the first law, that the universe operates in giving, receiving, knowing that's how the universe operates, that, if I give, so shall I receive.
Mhm.
Knowing to what extent can I completely detach from the reward and discover the joy of giving? And that obviously means resolving any attachment I have to ideas like reciprocity, or I expect a return for my investment. The return
Right.
always comes. The further I'm detached from the reward, the more it multiplies.
Yeah. And for someone listening to this episode right now, if you're enjoying this, make sure that you share it on your wall or in your group, because, I'm really enjoying this conversation and we're sharing so much. So, the small button that you can press, it will make a huge difference. So Sujit, you also said that the universe does not give back in the same order in which it is given. So help us explore this a little bit, the order part of it.
It's there are many dimensions to this, by the way. The fifth law,
Yeah.
Aditya, is the law of non-locality.
Mm,
That means giving and receiving is non-local in time and space, both in
right.
time and space. In space, it could mean two things. One is, you know, you give me something, Aditya. If you really look at the law of abundance, what
Mhm.
you will receive back may not necessarily be from me.
Ah,
you know like this incredible gift that you're offering people, breath work and meditation and all of that, in these lockdown times, especially in these lockdown times, it's become so important for people to use the opportunity to heal themselves,
mhm,
because a lot of people are suffering from isolation, from loneliness. And I don't want to sound insensitive, I don't want to sound narcissistic, but there is a simple realization, however provocative it may sound
mhm,
to some of our listeners. There's a simple realization that when I feel lonely,
mhm,
when I'm alone, it is a symptom of lack of self love.
mm,
If I love myself, if I rejoice my own company, if I love my companionship, how am
mm.
I alone?
Right.
I am there for myself. I mean, I as capital I. I'm there for myself. I'm never alone. That I'm in the presence of the self,
Mm,
and through the presence of the self, I am in the presence of all my beloved ones,
mhm,
all my ancestors and forefathers and foremothers and all of that. We are truly never alone. And it is just in that practice of self love that we experience that irreplaceable companionship.
mm.
So, I COVID times, this has become a very important prerogative for many,
Yeah.
many people, lockdown times. And with this lockdown, the kind of service you offer, breath work, meditation, it acquires a completely more important significance today. And yet, important here, the fifth law of abundance, the law of non-locality, means that, and I want to acknowledge what you're doing. You told me, Aditya, that you offer all your service to humanity and the planet on a donation basis. You too.
Yeah. At the moment, it's a one-on-one sessions. I'm sort of going step by step into this experiment where all my one-on-one sessions, are fully donation-based. Pay what you want, pay what your intuition tells you,
Hmm.
and service first. Let me, give you the support that you need.
Wow.
Yeah.
And remember, the fifth law, the law of non-locality, means it doesn't matter. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Whether you are offering a service one
Yeah.
on one, or towards a group, or towards a plant or an animal,
Yeah.
doesn't matter. What will happen is you will notice the
Mm,
circle close.
right.
That means, in return for what you offer, what you deserve will always come to you from
Mm,
the most, um, from a source unexpected. It will come.
right.
That is non-locality in space. And
Mm,
another dimension of non-locality in space is, you know, um, simple. You go to a supermarket
mhm.
and you extend $5,
Yeah.
you get a bottle of shampoo. Now you see that already is a different form of exchange. You
Mhm.
know, the lady at the counter is not giving you $5 Canadian back.
Mm,
you're receiving something else that already in space, in form, is different. So it
Hmm.
doesn't matter, what in what medium we are exchanging, as long as there is exchange.
Hmm.
And the law of non-locality says that the universe is non-local in space. That means for all the gifts that you receive, you will receive back. Sometimes it's from parents. And I know in the continent that I am living at this
Right.
moment, I notice also in North America, I
Mm.
notice a lot of adults have difficulty accepting from their parents.
Mm.
You're going through a difficult time.
Yeah.
You're in a process of discovering yourself, and you don't have an income, etc. And your parents, they see you, they notice you, they recognize the struggle you're in, and they're like, you know what, I want to give you $1,000. And
Right.
there are many adults, in this continent and also in North America that I meet,
Yeah.
who feel bad about accepting from their parents. And I tend to ask them lovingly, though. I tend to ask them, like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
What's wrong? You're not putting a gun to somebody's head and you're demanding. No, you, the universe knows that you need, and what you need is being brought to you through your parents, through the channel, through the government, whatever it is. The best gift we can offer in exchange is to have a sincere thought or word of gratitude.
Mm.
That's enough. Case closed. And that is the non-locality in space. Similarly, non-locality in time, Aditya.
Yeah.
In time, uh, you might be extending a breath work service to somebody or a client, and she might not be in a place today to offer you a token of appreciation in return.
Hmm.
So be it. There would come a time in the future where she or somebody else will reward you,
Right.
or maybe in the past you already got the reward
Yeah.
for what you are offering today. That
Yeah.
is non-locality in time, recognizing our rewards come not in that instantaneous moment when we give, but in the past or in the future. That is the non-local nature of how the universe works with abundance.
Hmm.
And opening up to that abundance with the simple recognition that the universe is a very, very generous force. That helps me a lot. That really helps me a lot.
Yeah, and I'm sensing that anyone listening to this episode right now can feel a weight lifted off their shoulders because they don't have to keep score anymore, keep account anymore. I owe this person this much, I owe this person that much, I got to give. And while that might be prudent or the adult thing to do, what you're saying is you got to tap into a bigger accountant, which is the universe, and know that your receiving is not going to happen from the same person. It might, but might not be from the same person, might not be exactly tomorrow or day after tomorrow, or maybe you already received it. And you're really tapping into a grander technology, so to speak. But my question is, how can a person who's new to this develop the trust? Because it feels like we're in a boat and it's deep waters, and you're
Mm.
encouraging them to jump into the water, hoping that there'll be some level of buoyancy that's going to push them above rather than drown them. And especially a lot of people might be fathers or mothers, and they've got dependents like elderly parents or even children. So in trusting the universe of give and return, and that it will come back,
Yeah.
there's a little bit risk or trust involved, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Like thousands of people
Right.
have undertaken this experiment
Yeah.
since I released the seven mystical laws of abundance. And everyone has a very unique story, Aditya, to
Yeah.
share. You have a very unique story to share. Can you take a few seconds for the sake of our listeners to lay out your process of coming to offering all your services on a donation basis?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My thought process was firstly, breath work. My service is useful. And I thought to myself, inspired by you, like, who am I to put a dollar figure on the services that I offer that are one on one? If I raise my prices, that's limiting access to some people who need it the most. If I lower my prices, maybe I'm undervaluing myself because everyone values a particular service differently. Somebody
Exactly.
who's deep into breath work will be like, yeah, that's good. I'm used to this. Somebody who's for the first time in breath work has a lot of stress, burnout. For them, this could be worth $1,000 because that could
Exactly.
mean they get a new job, find a new relationship. And also, I loved your encouragement in terms of telling the people to go through the process of estimating what a session is worth to them rather than to me, and also opening up to more abundance. It felt a bit more freeing, and yeah, I'm loving it so far.
And I'm really happy to hear that you stick to it.
Yeah,
You maintain the faith and the courage
yeah,
to stay with that conviction.
yeah.
You said it right. That you it'll be just your ego if you try to put a price tag on your service, because
Hmm.
who are you to determine what your service is worth to me?
Yeah, yeah,
you know I might be in a stage of my life where my life is in complete darkness,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I would get into practice with you,
yeah,
and the light emerges. That
mm,
suddenly becomes priceless.
yeah,
And for you to say, wait a minute, no, this session is worth $95 or 120 or 150 or whatever the going rates are,
yeah,
that is presumptuous. That is the ego in function.
mm, yeah,
And I 15 years ago, you know uh, stepping out of the corporate world, um, honoring the calling that I was feeling from within to give myself fully to this, to help build a conscious world.
yeah,
um, you know I had to ponder very deeply on the same question that you have been more recently pondering on.
hmm,
And no amount of intellectual engineering can help.
mm,
I remember catching myself at one moment, this is like more than 15 years ago, where
hmm,
I used to keep a spreadsheet,
yeah,
really, calculating how much I would need every month in
mm,
order to make both ends meet,
yeah,
and how many services do I offer every day or every week, etc.,
yeah,
in order to make both ends meet.
yeah,
There came a moment in my life where I caught myself, wait a minute, I am allowing my ego to
mm,
dictate its way. And
hmm,
I'm not suggesting that our listeners take the kind of radical approach that I did. That
yeah,
was one day I just deleted that spreadsheet,
hmm,
and I simply said, like, you know what? To hell with all of that.
mm,
I simply just need to practice a faith.
mm,
Faith in in the generosity of the universe. And as you beautifully put it, there is this um, um, higher bookkeeper.
hmm,
There's a universal bookkeeper, accountant, who keeps track of every act of giving out there.
hmm,
Called it the field of consciousness, where there's an algorithm, an intelligence that keeps track of every act of giving.
right,
And having faith in that field is essential.
mm,
Now, the approach I took, Aditya, was a very radical one.
mm,
Deleting that file and then simply just announcing to the world, like, all my masters before me, they've all given with
Mm-hmm.
complete detachment, with full practice of the third law, the law of detachment. And so am I going to do. There's also perhaps a more incremental, measured way of embracing this way of
Mm-hmm.
unconditional giving. That is, just simply take the seven laws into your life and start experimenting with each one of them in an
Mm-hmm.
incremental fashion. Try out, ask yourself, what does the law of exchange mean for me? How can I embody or inculcate the law of exchange in my life, or the law of echo in my life? In those
Right.
gradual measures, you will start noticing you
Yeah.
are rewiring your old habits, the way you were attaching yourself to the reward, or some people who are in light work or in spiritual work or in coaching, etc. I've met people who very actively realign their portfolio of clients.
Mm.
So they look at the clients who are profitable, the clients who are not,
Yeah.
and they'd say, like, what, hey, these are unprofitable clients, so I devote less time to these
Yeah.
clients. And in my portfolio, these are the profitable clients, so I'm going to give more attention to them so that my returns will multiply,
Yeah. Yeah.
without
Yeah.
without understanding that it's all integral. The
Yeah.
reason why you're receiving so much abundance through the the affluent clients
Yeah.
is because of all the gifts that you offer to the less privileged or the less fortunate clients. So
Yeah.
an important practice to do here simply is to suspend that discrimination. So it can be a
Wow.
very gradual, measured process, Aditya, to answer your question,
Yeah.
to take each bit of this reflection into your life personally, and
Mm.
step by step, start making those inner shifts. And then you will be amazed with the amount of abundance that's coming your way.
That's very true and very profoundly put. Sometimes I think about things but don't have the lexicon to explain it. So I appreciate you sharing that. And it's very true. I notice all these Facebook ads and, people who want to, help you grow your business. And they're like, look at your portfolio, go towards the high ticket clients, people who are able to afford your services. And the people who are not, let them go. They don't deserve you. And I
Uh,
always was not attached to that way of looking at things. I mean, I'm deeply appreciative that I got to start my journey through a podcast, because it would imply that I had to put a lot of work in creating 1 hour, 15-minute long interviews for free,
mm,
without expecting, much in return. And to your point, when my mom was sick in the hospital, I reached out to them in a very vulnerable way, seeking
mm,
nothing but appreciation, prayers, and many of them were Reiki healers, energy healers, yoga
mm,
therapists.
mm.
And the response that I got from people, hundreds of
Very
comments, people
wow,
praying, email
wow,
replies saying that
wow.
I'm holding your mom in your intention. She's coming out of here. That to me is the
Uh,
greatest amount of social currency there
there you
is.
go.
These
There
are
you
people
go.
who have maybe they bought a workshop from me. Maybe they've not spent anything on me. And
There
they
you go.
themselves are going through financial difficulties. But it's
Yeah.
just the goodwill sometimes that
Yeah.
makes all the difference. That helps you get those high ticket clients. Right?
It is, what a beautiful story. What a
Yeah.
beautiful story. When you have so that much love in your
Yeah.
life, Aditya,
Yeah.
what would an extra zero or an extra
Yeah.
couple of zeros in your bank account mean? Means
Exactly.
nothing. Means
Yeah.
nothing. You laid it out so beautifully in such a touching way,
Yeah.
how generous humanity is.
Yeah.
It is, I know many of us, I hate to say it, most of
Right.
us, we've
Hmm.
created a narrative in our life that people are not generous.
Yeah.
Select few are generous.
Mm.
Not true. Not true. Yes, because of our inner lack, many of us are obsessed with self interest. I
Mm,
understand that because the ego is the force that ensures our self preservation.
correct.
And when the ego hijacks our life, we will just be obsessed with
Mm,
self preservation. How do I keep my soul and body together?
mhm,
And when somebody is caught up in the consciousness of self preservation, then to expect them to give generously to other is difficult. We understand. Yet,
mhm,
deep within that egoic self, there is an infinitely generous self that every single human being has.
mhm,
And this unwavering conviction that I have in the generosity of the universe, of human beings, that is today unshakable because I have
mm,
so many examples. Because I'm a practitioner of abundance, I'm very mindful of every act of giving and receiving that keeps happening around me. And I notice over and over again how generous people are. They are incredibly generous. So, having that
mhm,
faith in the generosity of people, that is an extremely important groundwork
mhm.
for abundance creation.
Wonderful, wonderful. I love that what you shared is not to mistake the present identity of a person with who they are, in the long term, their soul. And if one person is generous, then you are essentially interacting with the rest of humanity. You're interacting with the rest of potentiality. If one person can be generous, then the other person can be too. Just like the quote that says, "You're not a drop in the ocean; you're the entire ocean in a single drop." So,
Yeah.
in one single human being, you're interacting with the rest of humanity. And if one person can express that generosity, who knows who they were before? If you look at the author of the Ramayana, Valmiki, he was a robber in a past life, but he
Yes.
decided to change. He wrote
Yes.
the greatest book.
Yes. Absolutely. That is such a profound reminder for us, Aditya, that
Mm,
we have within us that self that is infinitely generous, that has the potentiality for generosity, for incessant generosity,
mhm,
and holding every person in spite of how they reciprocate in a given moment, holding every person to that standard.
mhm,
That is a very important step in our own abundance creation within.
mhm. So, since you made that change to your pricing model, so to speak, offering everything on a donation basis, what is like the most interesting story or anecdote you know you came across that re-emphasized that you made a amazing decision for yourself and your family? Anything that comes to mind?
Hmm. I could take the next 2 weeks
Mm,
filling you with stories of incredible abundance.
mm,
But my current favorite story
mm,
is the story of this home.
right.
This
Mm,
is this home is a home that's located in the hills next to Venice.
mhm.
And by the way, you're located in Vancouver, BC, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
I don't know if you know that I used to have a home in West Vancouver.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't know that. Okay.
All right. You know, 10 years in West Vancouver, and it was in 2019 that my family and I we decided to move further east.
Okay.
And the yearning for all of us towards greater self-realization, we felt we wanted to move further east, and we were like, we wants us to be next, but
Mhm.
we will allow the universe to show us. Long story short, and it was clear to us that we are not going to be in a city, West
Mm.
Van, you cannot call West Vancouver exactly a city, but
Yeah.
still, it was a city. We, um, it was clear, city, no, we want to be in nature.
Mm.
That was the only thing that was clear. Whether it's going to be Europe, whether it's going to be Asia, nothing clear. And we said,
Mm.
we're going to watch the universe. We're going to listen to the universe. The universe is going to communicate to us where we ought to be next.
Right.
And guess what? In 2019,
Mm-hmm.
a group of people from across the globe, more than 300 people from across the globe, came together and gifted my two kids a home.
Mm.
This home is in the hills with nature on four sides. Wherever I look, all I can see is nature,
Mm.
massively spacious, lot of land around, a spacious home. We received this as a gift from more than 300
Ah,
people on 5 continents. And
amazing.
I myself, I think Aditya, I live a life of material minimalism
Mm.
simply because, I'm not somebody who needs much.
Yeah.
I'm happy wearing something that I've worn for the last 10 years. Um, I don't need a replacement every season. I
Mm-hmm.
continue to practice reducing my eco footprint to be kind to the ecology. So, material minimalism, and there's also a very profound spiritual reason, by the way, behind the practice of material minimalism. We can go there if you want to. Either ways, so I'm not really inclined to want to have more material possessions in my life. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, my little boy who recently turned 6,
Okay.
he's a wild spirit. You let him be, and he's going to change the color of your home.
Yeah.
He's going to rearrange the furniture. He's going to turn your kitchen into, I don't know, a playroom. He's that kind of a wild spirit. And for my kids to have a little space where they can call home, where they can draw on the walls and drag the furniture across the floor and do the things that kids love doing. That was a yearning that I expressed to the universe.
Mm-hmm.
A place where if tomorrow I don't wake up, they
Mm-hmm.
still are sheltered. And talking of abundance, the way the universe has responded, we have this beautiful home. They both
Mm.
love it to bits. They're living every square inch, square centimeter of this home. That for me is the latest story of abundance I like to share. No mortgage, no bank loans, no debts. Of course, I'm indebted uh,
Mm-hmm.
forever to hundreds of people who actually, once the home was ours, more than 100 people, they came visiting from across the globe to restore the home.
Ah.
Restoration, from across the planet, people coming by, saying like, Sujit, just give me a place to sleep. And it was incredible. And we have a wall with the photos, the
Mm-hmm.
names of all these people who are generous souls. This is the universe doing its magic. The more
Mm.
and more you continue practicing the 7 laws, the
Mm-hmm.
more and more you start noticing the exponentiality of things, which is the fourth law, the law of exponentiality. In a conscious plane, receiving is exponential to giving.
Mm-hmm.
It's only in our worldly plane, in our wakeful consciousness, we think giving and receiving are proportional.
Right.
Like if I give $5 to you I get $5 worth of shampoo.
Mhm.
That is the in our wakeful consciousness, that is how things work. But in the universal plane, in the cosmic consciousness, receiving is exponential to giving. That means if I give one from a very selfless place, just for the joy of giving, the receiving is 10, 100, 1,000. I know for myself, if I had worked my whole life for a paycheck, I would never, ever be able to, own a house like this. But that doesn't matter to the universe. The
Right.
universe is exponential. And of course, with such gifts also comes great responsibility. That means, the simple recognition that I have to continue to live my life consciously in service. But that is a story for you, Aditya, of how generous the universe is.
Thanks a lot for sharing. This is indeed a powerful story, a testimony, so to speak, about the nature of the universe. And I love that you shared. And from time to time, we need to listen to what the universe is telling us. And if I'm being honest, the universe right now is calling me to Vancouver Island to live in Victoria. And as you
Wow.
might know, yeah, 3 years back, I went to Vancouver, Victoria Island, and I sat in along I think it's called Gonzales Bay, right across James Bay, where you're in a shallow waters and you can see the Mount Olympus Mountains on the other side in the USA. And I had a very mystical experience there, maybe like a Satori moment where I
Hmm.
could see the water glistening far, into the horizon, and I could feel the warm air and the pebbles below was comforting me. There was a sacred energy, so to speak, that was beckoning me. And I knew deep down that sometime in the future, I'll spend
Ah,
some time in Victoria, away from the city, closer to nature, really getting opportunities to ground myself, put my legs in the sand, and feel
wow.
the presence, the grounding. So, if I'm being honest, it's calling me, but we'll have to see, where this leads. And my question to you is, Sujit, in order for you to live such a lifestyle as a father, as a husband, you need to have a really strong and supportive wife as well, right? Somebody who also trusts in these principles of abundance, of spirituality. Because otherwise, if you don't have somebody like that, they'll be like, "Are you okay? You got to be a responsible person. How are you doing this, right?" So, are you open to sharing how you met your wife, and develop this strong spiritual partnership that is making an impact and helping people around the world?
Um, Thanks for that question. Indeed, indeed, Aditya. Definitely, I'm fortunate that my wife also shares my standards.
Mm,
When it comes to the giving and receiving part of life. She's a world-renowned coach and author for women on
mm,
helping women embody their divine feminine, and
mm,
helps countless women across the planet, you know one on one and in groups, but mostly in groups these days.
mm,
And yes, you know um, if if you are in a relationship,
mm,
it helps to have a partner who shares your sacred standards for life, because you know if you are stuck in a relationship where
mm,
all you're doing is spending your time trying to force fit your relationship to your dreams,
mm,
then that is not your destiny.
mm.
That is not God's intention for you. It is not how it's meant to be.
Right.
Alignment, balance, symphony is the
Mm,
nature of the universe. If you look around and look at the perfection of nature,
mhm,
you notice that symphony. Winter comes to an end, spring begins, birds automatically know how to make a nest,
mhm,
they lay eggs, hatch them, The bees, the flowers bloom. Bees know how to go find the honey. They make their hives. You see, there is a perfection to that harmony. And that is what each one of us we are destined to. If that is not what is manifesting in our lives, then there
Mm-hmm.
is healing involved. There's healing involved.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've been very fortunate that, I have a partner who shares my sacred standards with respect to life. And it's not just my partner, but many, many people around me who feel the same way. And
Mm-hmm.
she's somebody who I met actually in Italia.
Mm.
This
Sure.
is 11 years ago. And Italia has been one land that has welcomed me for many, many years with such a wide open heart for my
Mm.
service, for my events, retreats, talks. Every year,
Right.
Italy used to be a land that I would visit.
Okay.
And if you know Italians, they are extremely connection driven people. They can't live without connection.
Mm-hmm.
They are high intense connection people. And with the advent of social media, Italians have intensified that community feeling online.
Right.
And me being a spiritual practitioner in that field, and my wife was also part of that field. That's how we connected. We got to, because we were part of the same community, we met. And we met in Milano, and we realized we have a common path to walk together.
Mm.
That is the
Amazing.
romantic side of the story.
Love that. Love that you shared that and that you were open to sharing it. And it's so important to not just, I mean, if that's your goal to be in a relationship, but to be in a relationship where both of you have a mission, a purpose, but also are supporting each other in working towards that goal, but also growing together. That's amazing. And Sujit, you also said something once along the lines of sometimes being in a country or growing up in a country that was once colonized, like India, for almost
Mhm.
thousands of years, in a
Yeah,
way can lead to some scarcity mindset, right?
yeah.
Is that correct?
Oh, very much. Please.
Yeah, yeah. So my question was around that, like, what
Yes.
can we do about this? How can people, especially those who have inherited some level of scarcity through patterns or traumas,
Yeah,
collective from their ancestors,
yeah.
how can they experience more freedom and more of an abundance mentality in this
Mhm.
situation?
Wow. Um, uh, you know, you raised a very, very important point. That is,
Mm,
a lot of our scarcity wounds
yeah.
are inherited.
Mm,
I know growing up, the material difficulty I had,
mm,
the material scarcity. And perhaps looking back, the more formative or conditioning experience wasn't the material scarcity in my life, it was the scarcity consciousness of my parents.
mm,
Because their parents and their parents, etc., they lived in so much scarcity.
yeah.
And growing up with that scarcity, there is something beautiful also about it. That is, there is a great appreciation of the material resources in life.
Yeah.
That, you receive something and you cherish it so much because you it is precious to you. So
Mm,
it brings a different level of awareness towards things, and I'm grateful for that, because even today I have never forgotten to cherish the beauty of the little things that come my way.
mm, yeah.
Somebody wants to give me gifts, you know, it's enough that they give me one gift so that I can fully live the experience of that gift. And the scarcity consciousness, though, we inherit it from our
Mm,
past lives and from our ancestors, as I did from my parents.
mm,
That, you know, they suffered a lot, they struggled a lot, and I'm grateful for those struggles.
Mm.
And I notice that growing up, I also used to measure the value of things through that scarcity consciousness. And the choice we have, though,
Mhm.
is fully within our capacity. And Aditya, you told me that you signed up to the Being Abundance movement.
Mhm.
This is a movement to help humanity shift from the scarcity consciousness to the abundance consciousness. Because if you look at the pre-COVID times,
Mhm.
the normal that humanity used to live, you know, I'm surprised that some people would call it normal,
Mm.
because most people around me, the common folks around me, they did not experience that life as normal. Work life balance was off. Many were disengaged from their communities and society.
Mhm.
Um, they the economic inequity was so big,
Yeah.
political apathy and polarization just growing and growing, not to mention the ecological devastation.
Mhm.
That was the old normal. And if you take a step back and you look at how we created that old normal, you will
Mhm.
realize it's all because of our inner scarcity.
Right.
you know because of our inner scarcity, we give 70, 80 hours of ourselves to work and not to our
Mm.
family. Because of inner scarcity, we have disconnected ourselves from our community. We don't invest any time into our communities. Because of inner scarcity, we have hoarded money, and there is such huge economic inequity in society.
Yeah.
Because of inner scarcity, we have been so power hungry. We have
Yeah.
been so ideological in our politics and governance. Because of our inner scarcity, we have plundered the ecology. You see, if we can use this lockdown moment to help humanity shift from the scarcity paradigm, the scarcity consciousness, to the abundance consciousness, then we can create a completely new reality. And
Mhm.
that choice is the mission of the Being Abundance movement. And the simple recognition here, there, Aditya, is that we have a choice. Every one of us, we have the choice.
Mhm.
We can make the choice to shift ourselves from the inner lack to inner abundance. And
Mhm.
that is the law of echo. The law of echo says that everything that manifests around us
Mhm.
is an echo of everything that we manifest within us.
Mhm.
So when we experience relationship scarcity or material scarcity, make no mistake, there is inner scarcity, and that inner scarcity is getting reflected or echoed outwardly in the material plane or in the worldly plane. And in the Being Abundance movement, we focus on helping humanity embody the abundance consciousness. Because from that place, there is this incredible shift,
Mhm.
incredible healing and growth that we can orchestrate. Incredible. Just that inner place. So doesn't matter, in 1100 AD, India used to be the richest land on the planet with 30% of global GDP, and then thousands of years of material scarcity and relationship breakdowns and plundering and genocide. None of that matters.
Mm.
Doesn't matter that our grandparents starved, our
Mm.
parents starved, we all lived in one room,
Mm.
and there was one lamp in the whole house with one
Yeah.
switch. That is, none of that is relevant. All
Right.
of that is there, we are conditioned within. But to move from the scarcity consciousness to the abundance consciousness,
Mhm.
that is a personal choice. The seven laws are basically tools to enforce that personal choice, but it's a personal choice. And the moment we embody that abundance consciousness, then in the worldly plane,
Mhm.
in the material plane, everything will transform into abundance.
Love that. Love that. My knowing about India and the history of India was limited to what I learned in school from the textbooks when I was growing up. And boy, did I learn that the textbooks were full of propaganda. But 2 years back, 3 years back actually, I came across some books that really illuminated the truth about India and the vastness about our heritage and the knowledge of yoga and Tantra and Ayurveda and Vedanta. And the fact that a lot of this information was actually repurposed once it came back to the West. And no bad to the West, they also did their job in, promoting Indian Vedic sciences and yogic sciences. But like you put it, there's always an opportunity to now go back and really uncover the truth about what India was, is, and will be as we cherish our own gifts, whether it's from Kerala, whether it's from Kashmir, North India, West India, East India, and also support the rest of the world in this growth and development. And I love that you're putting forth a new idea, a new vision about what we can bring about in this world from the old normal, which wasn't really the normal, it was a bad normal, to a new and empowering normal for the rest of humanity. Sujit, you mentioned that true wealth is neither a possession nor a resource. It stems from the universe. So help us,
Mm.
understand this concept a bit, because there's so many
Yeah.
different definitions about wealth and how you build
Yeah.
it. So help us understand this a bit.
Wow. I firstly I want to acknowledge that the thought you shared about India, how grateful I am
Mhm.
that there is an element of Indianness within
Mm.
me.
Yeah.
If I can be accused of any identification, which is the nature of the ego,
Mm.
is what, identification, identifying with things, with anything. If you can accuse me of identification, let it be this one thing, the
Mhm.
Indianness that I'm gratefully holding within me. I don't
Wonderful.
mean India as a geographic thing or as a religious concept or anything. No, simply as a localized field of consciousness
Mm.
that helps me in my mukti, my liberation.
Mm.
So thank you for those words of acknowledgement to our roots.
Yeah.
The process of self-realization includes fully owning the wholeness,
Mhm.
including our roots. That an Iranian can never be fully self-realized by fully cutting their spiritual umbilical cord from their heritage,
Yeah.
like an Indian cannot.
Yeah.
You can become a fully Canadian or an American, and with having that spiritual connection to a vast ocean of which you are a part of.
Mm.
You are not only a part of that vast ocean, you're also, as you put it before, a microcosm of that ocean. So when
Yeah.
you cut that umbilical cord to your roots, you're actually diminishing that vastness of that microcosm within you. So thank
Mm.
you for those words of acknowledging your roots.
Mm.
Um, you know, the seventh law of abundance is the law of inexhaustibility.
Mm.
That means simple. True wealth is inexhaustible. And this is again subjective. For some people, um, the IT knowledge is wealth. For you, your wisdom of breath work is wealth.
Mm.
In the sense that when you offer a breath work session to somebody,
Mm.
suddenly you're not depleted. You don't lose in the process. You still have the knowledge of breath work with you. and somebody has benefited from it.
Mm-hmm.
Love, happiness, laughter is wealth. Because when you share wealth, when you share love, it multiplies.
Yeah.
It doesn't reduces at your end.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it in a purely clinical way, in a purely economical way, it's not easy to understand the expansiveness of wealth, true wealth.
Mm.
What do we say? In the materialistic paradigm, we say, oh, you know what? We create wealth
Mm.
through sweat, toil, hard labor. We create wealth. There's an alternate paradigm.
Mm.
And that paradigm, the paradigm of the wise souls, the mystics, the sages, is the simple recognition that the universe is an abundant field. It's a field of infinite abundance, that what we call the unmanifest is a
Mm.
field of infinite possibilities, a field from which anything can be created.
Mm.
Anything can be created. And the moment you are willing to accept that, wealth is neither created nor destroyed, that wealth is not something that when we put hard labor and a lot of sweat and toil, 80 hours a week, 90 hours a week, create wealth. That
Mm.
is the the post-industrial age capitalistic thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, Vancouver is a very spiritually vibrant city where people
Mm-hmm.
are actively exploring alternate modalities of attracting abundance. Um, there is this recognition that we need to tap into this field of infinite abundance. And
Mm.
tapping into that field means it's not an act, it's not an act of doingness,
Mm-hmm.
it's an act of beingness. When we align ourselves more and more and more with that field, with the universal field of abundance, then
Mm-hmm.
automatically we are also abundance. So the way to attract abundance is a daily process of self attunement with the universe. Or I'd say being abundance, the reason why the movement is called the being abundance movement. That if you want to manifest abundance in the worldly setting, the first thing we need to do, of course, there's an alternative, that at least that is what people believe, wrongly
Mm-hmm.
so. Sorry to be judgmental. That if I would just apply myself 100 hours a week, I will have abundance.
Mm.
In net, that's not true, because you might apply 100 hours of yourself to attract a little money into your bank account, but you're not abundant. You're still
Right.
depleted, you're still scarce, you're still absent in love, you're still unpresent to your kids, you're disengaged from your community and connections, you are
Mm.
disengaged with the self, just the celebration of the self, all these areas. Never mind. The, the seventh law, the law of inexhaustibility, talks about our endeavor to align the self with the universal field of infinite abundance. So it is a process of self attunement. And the moment we can attune ourselves with that cosmic field, with that vibration, with that field, then
Mm-hmm.
suddenly we are also the same, as abundant as the universe is. So it is that is the secret to have holistic abundance in life.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm sure that people who are listening to the show right now are recalibrating their understanding of what they know about wealth, which is a new idea that you're sort of putting forth, which is you don't own the wealth, you don't work, hustle to get that wealth. but you are a custodian of that wealth that is there not to enrich you, but to create something of meaning, of purpose that will hopefully be remembered after you pass on. And so it's not about doing more, but it's about really aligning yourself with the grand flow, the tidal wave of wealth, so that it, puts forth things, opportunities, people, experiences that will help you, on your mission. And along that lines, you've said you are precisely given all your karma in order to live your dharma. So help us understand a little bit more about this, because sometimes karma and dharma, people have different interpretations of what they are. So
Indeed, I'm also looking at the time, so I want to be respectful to the constraints here, and
sure.
not to overload the audience. One of the things that I've always maintained is the science of consciousness is uncopyrighted. It
Mhm.
is accessible to all.
Yeah.
Many, many, many years ago, Aditya, I was invited to speak at a plenary in a United Nations session.
Yeah.
And I spoke about the 31st basic human right. That is the right to self-realization.
Mhm.
There's a list of 30 beautiful basic human rights mentioned, and
Mhm.
I admire each one of them. And we have a responsibility to ensure that everyone can live those rights. But I spoke about the 31st basic human right, the right to self-realize. That
Mhm.
means all this wisdom of consciousness that is been there even before humanity existed and will continue to be there even after the existence of humanity is meant for all.
Mhm.
And that means every one of my books, talks, videos, audios, even events, uh, I never put a price tag.
Mhm.
And knowing that there is plenty. And why I'm sharing this is because if there is any of your listener who feels that they are in a financially challenged place today, but
Mhm.
would like to embrace the the seven laws into their life, then they should never hesitate to reach out to me. Or perhaps easier is simply just going to beingabundance.org, and they have access to the seven laws in their own language. It's there in so many languages on that site, the seven
Mhm.
laws. No price tags attached to it, just so that they can continue practicing this wisdom. Uh, on the Dharma part, you know, each one of us, swadharma, each one of us, there is a unique path destined for each one of us to self realize.
Mhm.
For some people, it is an atheist path. For some people, it's a Christian path or an Islam path or a yogic path. Whatever that path is, that path is unique to each one of us. There's a reason for existence. Call it dharma for each one of us.
Mhm.
Now, each one of us, by virtue of our life experiences, we are being drawn in a certain direction in life. That is the karma part. To give you an example, suppose you have grown up in a family, in a very, to use a word from the Western psychology dictionary, a dysfunctional family.
Mhm.
The traumas within me, your karma is, having grown up in a dysfunctional or in an abusive family. um, when you grow up, there's a likelihood that you yourself would get into a dysfunctional family or relationship, or you will be a celibate or a single
Mhm.
because the traumas of those past experiences.
Mhm.
That's Those traumas are your karma. And the choices we make unconsciously based on those traumas take us. It's not unconscious. It's all part of a higher conscious design. Will take you, will help you make certain choices, will force you
Hmm.
to make certain choices that'll get you on your way of realizing the reason for your existence. From Vancouver City,
Hmm.
I know this example of a beautiful young lady. I remember once she came into one of my spaces in one of my retreats. And her story has been that for many years of her life, she took the path of drug dependency. So she was into drugs, and with a lot of help from many different people, she got out of it. But when she would look back, her greatest dread was not about the drugs itself. Her daily dread used to be that she would slip back into that old life.
Hmm.
So she lived for many, many years with that dread, that fear that she will slip back into that old life. And when she came into that retreat and she was there for a couple of days and she was going deep inwards, she came to this very, very profound realization of her Dharma. She concluded that in this lifetime, her sadhana, her service, seva, her gift to humanity would be to help others who have come out of drugs and who live in the daily fear of relapsing into drugs, helping them find courage and free themselves from that dread. You
Hmm.
see the connection between karma and dharma? Because she came through that life, she was unequivocal, crystal clear that her dharma, her way forward in her life in this form is to help others who live in this daily dread of relapsing into drugs. And she
Mm.
did such an amazing job. I'm sharing this example as an example of how karma informs our dharma. Also, hoping that for at least some of our listeners, this would be a message, a reminder to be grateful for some of our
Hmm.
past experiences.
Absolutely. And thanks a lot, Sujit, for sharing so far, Action Tribe. As we wrap up this interview, I hope you now have some principles, some ideas about how to experience more abundance in your life. Sometimes it's easy to get caught up with feelings of scarcity, like there's not enough, like you have to fight to get your share, or even emotions of feeling not enough, not smart enough, or not rich enough, not charming enough. And while that might be easy to believe because of our social reality, you must go inwards because your consciousness is the only reality. And it is from there that you must create. And there is no limit to what we can create based on what Sujit has shared with us from within your imagination. Because just like Michael Beckwith once put, there's enough for everyone. If you can believe it, if you can see it, if you can act from it, it'll show up for you. That is the truth. And Sujit, we've come to the last round for today. Four questions, rapid fire style, so that our listeners can take note and take some action. So, what is the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
Wow. Wow. Best piece of, I mean, there's so many best pieces coming up, but I'd say uh, the power of eternal optimism.
Wonderful. And if you could turn back time, spend 1 hour with someone who's living or maybe who is not living right now, who would it be?
Hmm. My dad, my dad, he passed away when I was 15,
Hmm.
and I carried him within me through many unhealed wounds for the next 17 years.
Hmm.
I'd go back and tell him, like, I love you and you've been the greatest gift in my life.
What is that one thing you do in the morning or in the evening before you sleep that has improved the quality of your life?
Hmm. Every morning, waking up into 20, 30 minutes of silence and self connection.
Wonderful. And how can someone get a hold of your book to learn more about, these principles of abundance?
All of my books simply online, anywhere, in many languages. If not, simply just send me a message through sujithravindran.com or Being Abundance Movement, and somebody will help.
Amazing. So we'll have all these links up in the show notes, especially if somebody wants to join the Being Abundance movement and be part of this global revolution that's happening, led by Sujith. Sujith, thank you so much for your time. Um, Action Tribe, if you have any questions, comments, observations for me, AJ at my7chakras.com, AJ at my7chakras.com. But so just thank you so much for coming on our show, talking to us about abundance, leadership, and the new world, and taking us one step closer to a human revolution.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for being who you are, Aditya.